Great, well, good afternoon everybody. Welcome to a discussion about vehicle safety. My name is David Ward, I'm the Secretary General of the Global New Car Assessment Programme. I'm going to kick off this discussion with a short presentation of what we're doing. I'm going to try and keep it very, very short, but also highlight some quite interesting, a little bit shocking information for you. So we have a project called the Safer Cars for Africa project, which I'm going to talk a bit more about. Just to explain, Global NCAP was born in 2011, so we're quite new. We're an international charity registered in the UK, and we bring together the 9 different NCAPs working around the world. And the key point about NCAPs is they do independent consumer crash testing alongside regulation. And we are registered as an observer with the United Nations. We have consultative status. There's a picture there of my colleague Alejandro Furras meeting in the UN in Geneva. Actually, he's there right now this week, so that could be a live photo, but it isn't. And we're very proud. A couple of years ago, we won a prestigious International Road Safety Award from Prince Michael of Kent. So, but essentially, our work is to work with all of these NCAPs, promoting safer vehicles. We've done a lot of work in emerging markets. The big story about the motor vehicle at the moment is not actually about autonomous vehicles, all this so-called disruption that we hear about. The real disruption going on in the automobile industry is in fact that production and sales are shifting massively geographically into emerging markets. In the last 10-15 years, we've seen China, for example, emerge as the #1 vehicle producer. Just this year, India became the 4th largest vehicle producer. The really big story is that there's been a huge change in geography. So about 50% of the world's passenger cars now are produced and sold in emerging markets. And one of the characteristics of those emerging markets, like here in Africa, is that they're very poorly regulated. So a lot of these markets, vehicles are being sold that do not meet UN crash test standards, for example, and other basic safety standards. So we've been working with governments, but also with the NCAPs, to encourage both the creation of NCAPs in these regions and also encouraging governments to regulate. We particularly support Latin NCAP in Latin America, ASEAN NCAP, Southeast Asia, and we've had 2 projects. One, the Safer Cars for India project, which is a kind of catalyst towards an NCAP that's been running for the last 4 years. And we've been testing some of the most popular cars on the market. The picture in the middle is actually a very recent car. It's a Tata Nexon. It's an entirely Indian engineered vehicle. It did extremely well in the crash testing we did just a few months back. It was a 4-star car, very close to a 5-star car. Very, very good result. And that's just in 4 years. And in India also, in the last 2 years, they've regulated, they've adopted UN equivalent standards, front and side impact. Huge change. And then last year, we started a project in Africa called the Safer Cars for Africa project, and it started testing vehicles from South Africa. That's what we've done so far. A major theme for us is we want to eliminate production of so-called 0-star cars. That's cars that basically would not pass the basic UN crash test standards. And I'll come up to that in a second. Our vision is, if you look at current production around the world, is about 73.4 million new passenger cars being produced around the world every year. We estimate that about 20% of that production fall below what we think are minimum acceptable standards. They either don't have basic crash test standards, they don't have airbags, ABS and so on, and electronic stability control. And a kind of example of a vehicle that epitomizes that, fortunately now out of production, is this one. That's the Nissan Tsuru, which was sold in Mexico until a couple of years ago. Very weak body shell and so on. In contrast, the vehicle on the right, that's a Volkswagen Up, sold in Brazil. It's a 5-star car, and it's meeting our expectations. And our 2020 ambition for the current UN Decade of Action is to ensure that by 2020, there are no more 0-star cars, and we end up with new vehicles closer to the one on the right. We've produced a roadmap a few years back of what we think are the most important standards for front and side crash tests, seat belts and anchorages, electronic stability control, the anti-skid system, pedestrian protection, which softens up the vehicle front, also motorcycle anti-lock brakes, which for instance India is now regulating for, and also AEB, the force emergency braking, although we're not recommending that for legislation yet. It's a little bit premature. We have a timeline. Usually it's like most best practice in vehicles. We talk about new models and then all vehicles in production, giving time for industry to adjust. Yeah, slow, sorry.
For the translator.
Excuse me while I'll try and slow down. And the bottom line is, it's really a 2020 goal. By 2020, we really don't want vehicles that don't meet these basic standards. That's our kind of 2020 vision. So, next slide. We have a strong mandate from the United Nations for this, applicable to all UN member states across the world. In April this year, the UN General Assembly adopted a resolution, and I've got highlighted in blue there the main text that was adopted by the General Assembly, and it calls on member states to apply the minimum basic standards for occupant and other road user protection, and also so-called active safety systems. That's systems like anti-lock brakes and electronic stability control. So that's a very strong endorsement. It's very unusual for the UN to have spelt out so clearly what is expected. In the run-up to that, the Secretary-General of the UN also prepared a report for the General Assembly, and he supported particularly the elimination of unsafe cars, which is sort of endorsing what we're saying, which is no zero-star cars. Also at in the General Assembly, another point of detail which is important for governments to focus on is there were a group of performance targets accepted by the General Assembly across a whole range of different road safety indicators. And there is one for vehicles, target number 5, which hopes that by 2030 calls on basically universal fitment of technologies like ESC by 2030. They want the main standards applied not just in new vehicles, but across the whole fleet. That's quite an ambitious target. It implies a lot of accelerated penetration of the better safety systems in vehicles. But it's interesting that was approved by the General Assembly, and it's an important benchmark for future progress. Now quickly to come on to the Safer Cars for Africa project. This is us actually in Cape Town unveiling the results in 2017. We're working with the AA of South Africa. That's the CEO, Collins Kamala, who we're working with. We've now tested 9 vehicles. We had a second set of results released just a week or so ago. It's a good story and a bad story. At the top end, we have some acceptable cars. 3-star car is an acceptable level of performance. Our crash test is run, it's a frontal impact crash test, run at a higher speed than the UN regulation. The UN regulation is 56 kilometers an hour, ours is run at 64 kilometers an hour. So it's a tougher test, and what you see is quite a lot of vehicles performing at 3 stars. That's well above the regulatory standard. But actually in South Africa, as across the whole of sub-Saharan Africa, no country is applying the frontal impact crash test yet at the moment. So that's quite good, that simply the market manufacturers are selling vehicles that are adequate. And the Toyota Etios, that's the best performing car so far at 4 stars. We're hoping that, again, like in India, very soon we'll have a 5-star car. Of course, this is only the South African market. That's where we've started our work, but we want to also test vehicles around the rest of the continent. But at the other end of the scale, we've got some very disappointing results. The Datsun Go, for instance, is just scraping a 1-star. That car originated in India, and the company, Datsun as a brand of Nissan, have made efforts to improve it. Then we have, at the bottom, the Chery QQ3 from China. That's a very bad car. It doesn't have airbags, and in the crash test, the head of the dummy hit the steering wheel broke. And then, very recently, we have this car, the Nissan NP300 hardbody. That is the best-selling pickup in South Africa. And I have to say, it's a truly dreadful car. Here are some images. We have the 4-star Etios, 3-star Hyundai, that's the Chery, and that's the so-called hardbody. You'll see the obvious differences. The 4-star car, the body shell has held up very well, the door frame is intact, the airbag and the driver's head are meeting appropriately, and the level of intrusion into the occupant compartment has been controlled quite well. Same is true with the Hyundai. That is not happening at all with the Chery. The body shell is collapsing. You can see the door frame at the top. Very often when that deformation happens at the top, at the other end of the scale, the footwell area is collapsing too. And of course the driver's head is impacting on the steering wheel, resulting in the risk of severe head and chest injuries. Then we come to the Nissan hardbody, and this is diabolically bad. This car has airbags, but they're simply not working properly. The body shell is totally collapsed. The steering column also detaches but doesn't collapse. And it's a zero-star car. There's an image of it. It's extraordinary to me that a vehicle like this is being sold today anywhere. What's worrying is that Nissan have plans to export this vehicle around Africa. And I mean, particularly disturbing to me is the way it's being promoted. It's called a hard body. Well, there's nothing hard about the body. The body is actually very soft. It's collapsed. Also, and you can see this today, if you look on the website of Nissan, it's promoting this car as having something it calls a safety shield. And the safety shield are the airbags and ABS. Well, it's a bit like going into battle naked with a cardboard shield. It's ridiculous that this car is being promoted as having a safety shield. There's nothing in any way that's going to defend you in a crash like that. And I cannot understand how manufacturers are offering for sale vehicles with airbags when they should know that they've under-engineered the whole body shell in this way. What you want in a good vehicle is that the body shell and the airbags and the steering column all interact together to dissipate the energy away from the vulnerable occupants. It simply hasn't happened here. Why is this happening? Well, partly it's lack of regulation. As I said, in the entire region of sub-Saharan Africa, nobody is applying the front and side crash test standards. And also, companies, I don't know why, but companies feel that they can produce vehicles like this, even though they say that they put the safety of their customer first. That's Nissan's response to this test 2 weeks ago, was we always put our customer first. Well, I've disputed that. I think they're either bad engineers or they're liars. It's that simple. This is simply an engineering failure, and it's totally unacceptable. So with the AA of South Africa, we are encouraging African governments to apply the most important UN vehicle standards that are available through the UN Forum for Vehicle Standards. South Africa is a party to those agreements. Very recently, so is Nigeria, which is very good news. But it's a voluntary system. You can join the UN regulatory process, but then you have to individually as countries agree to adopt the regulations or not. Hopefully they will. And so that picture in the middle is the QQ3. That's the Chinese vehicle, and you can see no airbag. And you can see the steering wheel has snapped because it hit the head of the dummy. You can imagine the kind of injuries that would happen if you were a human being hitting that steering wheel. The other thing that we want to do, which is really the work of NCAPS, is encourage this kind of independent testing. The publicity we got in South Africa a couple of weeks ago was extraordinary. One of the top Afrikaans newspapers, the crash test was front page. That in fact drives consumer awareness. It encourages consumers to be more demanding when they buy vehicles. It also encourages governments to react. And one of the things that we want to do is encourage more labelling of vehicles. Governments could require that labelling of vehicles, including crash test rating, should be included at point of sale. That would then generate a huge amount of extra information for consumers about safety. So that's something we think would be a very good thing to initiate across the African market. The other big story is about fleet purchasing. We know that a lot of cars and motor vehicles today are bought not by private motorists but by fleets, whether it's government fleets or other kind of commercial fleets from major companies and so on. They could opt for vehicles that are considerably safer. Global NCAPS developed a set of recommendations around fleet safety, basically saying never buy anything less than a 4-star car. And where we don't have rating information, because it's not available everywhere, insist when negotiating with the manufacturer that they certify that the vehicle you're buying meets the most important UN safety standards. And we're very pleased that in entire sectors are now discussing this. We're currently in discussions with the whole of the oil and gas sector, and companies like BHP Billiton, Shell, Total and others are close to adopting standards like this, voluntary commitments like this. So that's the kind of work we're doing around vehicles. Of course, there's much more to talk about in terms of other kinds of vehicles, motorcycles and commercial vehicles and so on. But we've got to start somewhere, and that's what we've been doing. And just to finish, I'd like to acknowledge we couldn't do what we're doing without support from Bloom Lake Philanthropies and the FI Foundation. They have funded the crash test work we're doing, and there are, that's again Collins Kamala from the AAF South Africa, myself, in Cape Town. And just to end on an amusing note, you always want to do the iconic photograph for a crash test, so we got special permission to go down to the docks in Cape Town to do that picture, because we wanted the tabletop mountain behind. And of course the mist set in and completely destroyed our photo opportunities. So we could be anywhere, but actually that's the iconic dockside in Cape Town. And Tabletop Mountain is behind us, believe me. Anyway, thanks very much for my introduction. So now I'm going to choose, any other panelists arrived? No? Anyway, I think we'll start simply on a ladies first basis, if that's okay. Is that all right with you? So, would you like to introduce yourself? Yeah, that's fine. I'll shut up. Right.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dr. Antonia Epa. I'm Nigerian, and I am the Director of Road Transport and Mass Transit Administration for the Federal Ministry of Transportation in Nigeria. I also double as the representative of my country because of my responsibilities on issues of road transport management, on ECOWAS issues, policies, programs, coordination of protocols, implementation of international protocols relating to the road. And I coordinate also all stakeholders in the country on issues of road sector and mass transit administration. So the responsibilities keep increasing. And we are partners with ECOWAS, the World Bank, and so many other international development organizations. That's who I am, I think. Oh, okay, fine. The issue of vehicle safety, as you well know, I think I want to thank you for the moderator for that beginning presentation, because it sets the stage, more or less, on what we're talking about. But for us in Nigeria, beyond car manufacturing, is the issue of car utilization and operations. I'm sure you also know that Nigeria produces some cars. We have Innocent Motors, we have Anamco, and a few others, and we also in Nigeria do house some international motor vehicle manufacturers. But primarily, most of the cars that come into Nigeria from Europe and the United States, we have a peculiarity with the issues of safety. And I think I want to start from where my passion is, which is the subject matter of road safety and the implications of having unserviceable vehicles operating on our roads. I wish this was a PowerPoint presentation, because it would have given us a clearer picture about what we're really talking about, because first and foremost, we have a situation. I want to present first the issues, the situation before what we're doing. We have a situation where majority of Nigerians, because of the economic implications, rely mostly on used cars. And from the United Nations Environment Programme's data, which we gather almost so frequently. And of course, you are aware that not too long ago, the United Nations Environment Programme had the Africa Mobility Week, and the revelations that came out from it were startling, shocking, and Nigeria was considered one of the countries with the highest prevalence of imported used cars. And the implication of this for us is the fact that most of these used cars are not usable in the producing countries. So the life of those cars most of them are more than 15 years old, or some are 20 on all of that, and they find their way into Nigeria. And the issue of emission, one of the participants raised the subject matter of emission of greenhouse and fuel emissions actually from cars. And we are handling that, and we consider that a major impediment to the environment and to the life of even the commuters who have to inhale this. But beyond that is the fact that we consider vehicle safety as a major element. Not only that the United Nations has prioritized that for the Decade of Action, but we have, from our own studies in the ministry, and of course you know that we have a very vibrant road safety organization, the Federal Road Safety Corps, and we have institutional arrangements to coordinate and monitor our road safety issues. And we have discovered that ancillary to the issue of vehicle or road safety is the fact that most of the vehicles that operate on our roads are aged. So when you have vehicles that are aged, and then of course you also have the issue of imported used tires. The tires, imported used tires, we have that, and of course our government has linked that, and it is one of the major factors that lead to deaths, especially highways, on our highways. And we have a situation where these tires are rebranded in quotation marks, or are retracked or retreaded, as they call them. And some of them coming from China. Well, I don't want to mention countries, but some of them, it's done already. Some of these come from countries. And you have to understand, we try to understand and handle this very maturely as a government, because when you look at the cost implications for the people of buying new tires and the imperatives of maintaining vehicles that have tires on the road, and then the costs, then you discover that people always go for the cheaper ones. So what the government is doing is to encourage people to take up, or government offers, you swap your old tires for new ones at a cost. So these are some of the actions that the federal government is looking at. But for us, we are automating, computerizing our vehicle inspection and facilitation. We have the Federal Road Safety Corps. I'm sure you're familiar with that. The Federal Road Safety Corps working at the national level, and then we have a national road safety strategy, which has as a key component of its operations the issue of vehicle inspection. So we also have, you know, we have a presidential system. So we have the national, the state, and the regional, or what we call the local government. And at all of these tiers of government, we are trying to harmonize operations to ensure that safety is not just a national matter, but at the states and the local operations, we have this. So we also have policy, because when you don't have policies and regulations, you have challenges. So we have put in place a revised National Highway Code for 2015 and up to to 2018. And as I speak, there's a lot going on now in Nigeria on the issue of safety. Last week I just came out from a sensitization program by commissioners. Commissioners are the state ministers, let me call them that, the equivalent of ministers at the national level. They have a forum, and there is a sensitization program ongoing in all the regions, the 6 geopolitical zones, drawing attention of the operatives, that is the federal government operatives, and sensitization of drivers and vehicle owners. And we have in our group, in this conference, key officials of the National Transport Operators Unions, transport owners and vehicle owners, and we try to bring them a stakeholder platform where we emphasize the implications of safety. And we also have what we call the roadworthiness programs. And before it used to be an all-government affair. Now we have basically involved the private sector in the ownership of institutional arrangements or platforms whereby private sector operatives can own vehicle inspection mechanisms or projects, and for licensing and for testing, and so you have computerized setups owned by the private sector working with government to ensure that all vehicles that run in our countries or in our country are inspected. And if you listen to the Minister of Federal Capital Territory, the Mayor of Abuja, as he's named in this program, you would have heard him say that now his city, that is the federal capital of Nigeria, has enforced the testing of vehicles before they are on the roads. And so because before when government was handling it, it was very difficult to enforce and coordinate. So now what we've done is to have the private sector working with government and owning more or less the franchise to inspect these vehicles, and government subsidizes to a large extent so that you bring down the cost of testing these vehicles. And the things that are tested are mostly the kind of things you've looked at here, the durability of the vehicle, the brake systems, the wipers during the rainy seasons, and other key issues that affect the vehicle. Then we also have regular inspection, after which a vehicle is issued a certificate. And now the Federal Road Safety Corps works with the state governments to ensure that there is everyday testing or testing and assessment of vehicles that ply our roads. And we are cascading this downwards from the national up to the state level. And we also have specifications for vehicle checklists, which the Federal Road Safety Corps issues. And we have, at the state level, those we call the Vehicle Inspection Officers, the VIOs. Now there is a tripartite arrangement where the federal government's agency, that's the Federal Road Safety Corps, and the state operatives, that is the Vehicle Inspection Officers, and at the local level, rural operatives coordinate and collaborate to ensure that the vehicles that are on our roads are inspected. We have a challenge, and that is our people get quite innovative. Sometimes it becomes a challenge for us. Innovative in the sense that, it's important as the United Nations is looking at curbing the abuse of vehicles. That's what it is actually, like the kind of thing you just showed to us. The abuse of vehicles, as the United Nations is looking at curbing the abuse of vehicles, and the non-implementation of the STAR process for vehicles. We also look at the poverty that drives the fact that people must use cars that are unsafe. So many times, it is not because people want to use those vehicles. It is because they cannot afford new ones. And for our country, for instance, where the dollar to the naira is very high, not too many people can afford the vehicles that are new. So the reliance on imported vehicles, even when the federal government has pegged life on or lifespan on those cars, we operate a 10-year allowance by law, but it is not enforceable because of so many other factors. So there is need, therefore, to consider making it cheaper. And I think this is one of the issues that we have to discuss here. And we have in this audience vehicle owners, or what they call transport owners. They own luxurious buses, coaches that ply intercity, and most of them cannot afford to put those new vehicles, brand new vehicles, on the road. So the temptation then is to resort to repair and repair and repair, and sometimes, in fact, in Nigeria, interestingly, we have those ones that we call Belgium, in quotation marks, Belgium parts. Belgium parts are the imported used parts, and those ones, for whatever reason, people believe they're durable, imported used parts. So there are people who are experts and who invest heavily in importing those things into the country. And most times, there is a collaboration between the Nigerian marketer who imports these things and the international marketer who exports them to Nigeria. So, and people get innovative in repairing these things, these Belgium, in quotation mark, Belgium parts into the country rather than buying new ones. And there is the myth, I don't know how, but it's something like researchers like you need to test. There is the myth that the new ones don't last. You believe me? There is the myth. So it is now for us to deconstruct the thinking of our people. Why do they believe that the new ones don't last? Why? Because most of the new ones come from countries, I beg your pardon, like China, where the quality, so there is a compromise, where the quality of the product that is new is compromised. And so the mechanics or the users now rely on used ones from Europe that they can attest to the functionality and durability. So these are some of the issues that while we are looking at the regulations and the United Nations standards, we need to also evaluate. But at the level of government, a lot is being done. Well, I need to emphasize the fact that for us, in the Ministry of Transportation, my minister was here until this morning. He has to rush back to meet the president at the meeting. We are enforcing and introducing solar-powered vehicles to substitute the tricycles that are not efficient for our roads. Most of the tricycles are imported and packaged and assembled in Nigeria from packed or produced in other countries and sent into Nigeria. And we have found with research by our Automotive Council that they don't last. Their durability, lifespan, not more than 2 years. So people invest a lot in these vehicles, but they don't last. So what my minister has done for this year, 2018, in our budget, is to introduce to Nigeria solar-powered vehicles and amphibious vehicles that are climate change compliant. So that's one thing that we've done, and we're looking and we're discussing. In fact, this afternoon we got some emails from the United Nations Environment Programme. We are looking at introducing electric vehicles. These are all components of the issues relating to safe vehicles. And we are also instituting what we call green transportation for us in the Federal Ministry of Transportation. Green transportation akin to climate change compliance, and we're looking at that. And we're also looking at trucking. The issue of trucks, most of our roads are destroyed if you look at it. And we are linking safety, road safety, safety of vehicles to the safety of our roads and the durability and functionality of our roads. When roads are bad, then you are bound to have more vehicles that are unsafe. Because most of the axle, the parts get bad quickly because roads are not good. So this present government has invested heavily on road construction and road repair and maintenance. And trucks are considered the major killers for us in Nigeria. And I'm sure if you Google, you'll discover that we have most of the road transport accidents or crash that you have are caused by fuel tankers. So what we're doing now is to consider other alternatives to fuel tankers distributing across the country. So we're looking at tunneling as an option, and most of our fuel now are piped underground, and a major infrastructure innovation that we have adopted to ensure that safety is a priority for us, because we're looking at, I saw in your slide, driver safety and the relationship to vehicle safety. We're looking at the fact of reorientating our drivers to comply with rests and usage of vehicles. Some of them drive all night. So for government, a major policy which is ongoing, and we have several investors now, is the introduction of truck transit parks, what you call rest stops in England. Okay, and so we're having those all over the country. And interestingly, my federal government, our government, has adopted what we call the Economic Recovery and Growth Plan, and it is housed by the president himself and coordinated by the vice president. And we are introducing as an economic policy the issue of safety of our roads, and transportation is a key pillar along with agriculture. So there is a link of all of this together, and we are very keen on that. And we are training and more training and sensitization at all levels of government. And the import of training and orientation and enlightenment is key for us. And implementation of structured testing of vehicles, including what we call Okada. Okada is a bike. So, and we have those in our rural areas mostly, and they're not safe. In fact, most of our people die on motorbikes. So we have a policy in Nigeria of banning the motorbikes from the cities. But the minister, and I believe him, and I stand with him, believes it is not enough for you to ban them from the cities, because when you ban them from the cities, you're peripherizing them and sending them to the rural areas where the poor are. So rather than do that, what you need to do is to introduce electric motorcycles and have electric stations in those localities, and also train the people on how to ride. Because if it is possible to have them in other parts of the world with appropriate training, then it's possible also to, and then of course, when you talk about vehicles, I don't think we should always think only of motor vehicles. We are introducing also cycling as an alternative. And I was talking about the innovativeness of our people. If you Google now, some of the transport smuggling vehicles that operate in the West Africa are manufactured by local people. So they could take any vehicle and dismantle it and couple it. That's what they call it. And they couple it, they weld it back, and you could have 3 vehicles in one, making a room for enough smuggling. So these are the kind of things we have to look at. And it goes back to the issue of poverty and the element of survival. And when we want to handle these things at the United Nations level, let us also look at the import and the link between poverty and unsafety, or safety, or whatever, on our roads. Thank you. I think that's
tremendous overview of all the challenges in Nigeria. I think what I'll do, if everyone's happy, is just take all of the panelists. Is there anyone else arrived who is a panelist? Come on, no? Oh, yeah, would you like to? You're a panelist. Are you a member of the panel? No. Okay, no, I'll let all the panelists do their presentations and then we'll have a discussion. So, next is Thomas Rovia from SGS.
Thank you very much. Indeed, Thomas Rovia, I'm the Vice President of the SGS Group, Société Générale de Surveillance SA. I'm in charge of the regulated services within the transportation division. And through this charge, we have the privilege to manage every year 32 million inspection of vehicles worldwide. We have 20 programs in 20 different states, and we are performing it for more than 20 years now. We have deployed more than 4,500 testing lanes for heavy vehicles, for light vehicles, but also for motorbikes, for 2 wheels and 3 wheels. And our experience in Africa regarding the implementation of those mandatory vehicle inspection programs is that, unfortunately, there are 2 main weaknesses. Number one is the enforcement, through the commitment of the authority force, like police, to make sure that every car goes to the vehicle inspection. The number 2 is the fear of the people, not of the inspection, but rather of the result of the inspection, which means for them huge repairs to be done. We have indeed noticed that the issue is not when you purchase a vehicle. There is always a way to find monies and to afford to buy the car you dream of. But when we talk about repairs, there is nobody and there is no money. It is impossible to find money, and this is the main issue. And the paradox of the situation is that actually the service, the inspection, is done to the benefit of the car owner, of the driver. And what we are investigating is the shape of the car in order to inform him about the risk to drive such car in such state. So there is still a lot of hope, because year after year we notice improvement, progress, and awareness campaigns are working well as well to make the population more concerned about the shape of the vehicle. In terms of road safety, SGS is also interfering in the second pillar that has been mentioned over the different presentations we had until now, such as the road safety in terms of infrastructure. We have implemented, for instance, in Kenya, between Mombasa and Nairobi, several weighbridge in motion and static weighbridge in order to detect overloaded axle on the road. This is a main issue in Africa because most of the trucks are overloaded in order to save money, in order to generate more revenues, but at the same time it is destroying the road, which is a road safety issue, and it is also an issue for the effectiveness of the brake when you have an axle overload in situation. So through this system we avoid to stop every trucks on the road to weigh them. We weigh them in motion, meaning that they are driving at a speed of maximum 30 kilometers per hour. And if the result of the weighing inspection detects 10% above overloaded, we automatically direct the truck to a counter-static weighbridge inspection. And in case it is confirmed it is overloaded, we force the driver to offload part of the truck and to reload another truck so that he has the authorization to go back to the road safely. So this is a second axle in which AGS is heavily involved, because we really think that it will also significantly help to improve the road safety in Africa. That would be it for me for the time being. I would like to leave time for questions.
Merci. Je me présente tout d'abord. Je suis Nourdine Saïd, je suis tunisien, je suis le directeur de la circulation au ministère du Transport en Tunisie. Permettez-moi tout d'abord, puisque l'occasion se présente, de remercier vivement mes frères marocains pour la qualité d'organisation de ce forum et surtout pour l'hospitalité qui n'est pas étrangère de nos frères marocains. Ceci étant, le cadre, c'est le véhicule sûr. Donc je vais vous parler de l'état des lieux en Tunisie concernant les véhicules. Mais tout d'abord, permettez-moi de vous donner quand même un petit aperçu sur l'organisation administrative en domaine du transport en Tunisie. Il y a le ministère du Transport qui est chargé de tout ce qui est réglementation et contrôle. Et pour l'application de cette réglementation, on a une agence nationale des transports terrestres qui, elle, est chargée de l'exploitation, donc dans ce cas de figure, de tout ce qui est réception, immatriculation des véhicules, contrôle technique des véhicules, et aussi elle est chargée de tout ce qui est permis de conduire, voilà, examen, opération administrative et tout. Notre parc automobile est de l'ordre de 2 millions de véhicules immatriculés. Mais réellement, il y a environ 1600 qui sont en circulation. Annuellement, on fait environ 1,8 million d'opérations de contrôle de visite technique. On appelle contrôle technique, la visite technique des véhicules. Je vais vous parler donc tout d'abord du volet réception des véhicules, immatriculation, et le deuxième volet, là, le contrôle technique. Actuellement, la réception se fait par rapport à un texte de loi, c'est un décret, et un arrêté de réception des véhicules. Les véhicules sont réceptionnés par rapport à des normes qui ne sont pas malheureusement bien définies. On dit le dispositif tel, le système tel doit être conforme à une norme reconnue. Quelle est la norme? Il n'y a pas de précision. Et là, c'est l'une des grandes lacunes dans notre réglementation nationale. Actuellement, pour remédier à cette situation, une nouvelle approche est en cours pour justement spécifier ces normes reconnues par tout simplement les règlements techniques de l'accord 1958 des Nations Unies. Un projet est en cours dans le cadre de la coopération entre la Tunisie et la France, précisément le Centre national de la réception des véhicules et l'UTAC-SALAM qui est chargé des tests des dispositifs et des systèmes des véhicules. Et nous espérons que d'ici 2019, on aura réglementé l'application d'une 50aine de règlements techniques. Et vous imaginez bien sûr qu'on va commencer par les plus importants du côté sécurité routière. Donc ça, c'est en ce qui concerne la réception des véhicules. Bien sûr, une fois le véhicule est réceptionné, on passe tout simplement à son immatriculation. Avant de passer au volet visite technique, je dois insister parce que nous attachons beaucoup d'importance aux travaux des différents groupes du WP9, qui est le Forum mondial de l'harmonisation de la réglementation des véhicules. Et au jour d'aujourd'hui, une délégation tunisienne assiste aux travaux du WP9 qui a commencé cette semaine. Et nous suivons, même si nous n'assistons pas aux différentes réunions des groupes de travail, pour des questions purement budgétaires, nous suivons avec un grand intérêt et minutieusement les rapports qui sont issus des différents groupes de travail du WP29. Pour le contrôle technique des véhicules, actuellement, l'Agence technique des transports terrestres dispose d'une trentaine de centres de visite technique. Je dois dire que la situation n'est pas dramatique, mais elle n'est pas bonne aussi. Il y a beaucoup de choses à améliorer. Donc, on a un réseau de 30 centres de visite technique. Le contrôle se fait par rapport à un texte réglementaire qui est un décret. Actuellement, il y a exactement 54 points de contrôle avec environ 70 ou 80 défauts qui pourraient être relevés lors de la visite technique. L'opération de la visite technique actuellement, elle dure entre 15 et 20 minutes. Dans les centres de visite technique, on utilise beaucoup de dispositifs. Donc, il y a le contrôle visuel, il y a le contrôle à travers des dispositifs qui sont bien sûr connus. Nous ne sommes pas très satisfaits pour la qualité de l'opération de la visite technique et c'est pour cela qu'on a déjà entamé depuis quelques mois une refonte totale du texte relatif au contrôle technique périodique. On s'inspire de la directive européenne qui est très rigoureuse et on s'inspire aussi de l'accord onusien de 1997 qui vient d'être d'ailleurs amendé. Et nous espérons passer de 54 points de contrôle à 99 points de contrôle et d'environ 70-80 défauts à environ 220 défauts. Ce texte réglementaire a atteint une phase très avancée et on espère le mettre en place en 2019. Parallèlement à ce texte, des procédures ont été entamées au niveau du gouvernement, plus précisément avec le ministère des Affaires étrangères, pour adhérer à l'accord onusien de 1997. Ceci concerne tous les véhicules d'une manière générale. Il y a une attention particulière qui a été, qui cadre des véhicules qui sont destinés au transport des matières dangereuses. La Tunisie est partie contractante de l'ADR, l'accord européen pour le transport international des marchandises dangereuses, depuis 2008, si je ne me trompe pas. Et on a une réglementation orientée exclusivement à ce mode de transport et, entre autres, aux véhicules qui sont destinés à ce mode de transport. Actuellement aussi, on est en train de faire une refonte totale du texte réglementaire qui traite de tous les aspects techniques des véhicules de transport de matières dangereuses. Une action de coopération avec le projet Euromed Transport est en cours pour réviser justement ce texte pour qu'il soit en harmonie avec les dispositions des chapitres 8, 9 et 6 et qui traitent tout simplement de tout ce qui est véhicule. C'est vrai que l'accord ne nous oblige pas à respecter toutes les clauses au transport international, mais notre objectif principal, c'est justement de mettre à jour et d'harmoniser la réglementation nationale avec la réglementation internationale. Laquelle réglementation internationale, nous sommes obligés de la respecter quand nos véhicules sont en transport international. Ceci étant, je voudrais me joindre avec ma collègue du Nigeria, c'est ça, pour conclure sur la formation. Justement, nous attachons beaucoup d'importance sur la formation et on a prévu déjà une formation imminente en France au Centre national de la réception des véhicules et à l'UTAC et nous espérons que ceci va se concrétiser dans les semaines qui suivent et non pas dans les mois qui suivent. Merci beaucoup.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Martin Eshiwani, Director Road Transport from Kenya. I'll be a bit brief, but basically, as my colleague from Nigeria did state, in Kenya, most of the vehicles that are imported are found on the road are imported. They are imported mainly from Japan and Europe. Regarding the state of those vehicles, we have arrangements with a number of companies that carry out pre-shipment inspection before they are brought into the country. And we do have age limit of 8, so that means that any vehicle which is aged more than 8 years old is not allowed to enter the country. So you will find that majority of the vehicles that are coming in are mainly 7.5 years old. But we do also have a number of companies that assemble vehicles within the country. And when we look at buses particularly, they are mainly new or in the sense that they are either imported new or assembled within the country. For example, Isuzu and others. With regard to mechanical condition or the state of the vehicles, the thing is that in the country, we have a compulsory motor vehicle inspection for all passenger vehicles and commercial vehicles. They are subjected to annual inspection. But recently we passed a law that requires all motor vehicles so that it covers beyond the passenger vehicles and commercial vehicles to include the private vehicles owned by individuals. This category has not been subjected to annual inspection, but we already have the legal framework. The challenge we have is that currently we only have 17 motor vehicle inspection centers with a capacity to inspect between 400,000 to 500,000 vehicles. But we have over 2 million vehicles in the country. So for us to be able to abide by the law, which requires annual motor vehicle inspection for all the vehicles, particularly those in the private hands that are 4 years and older, then we need to include the private sector in motor vehicle inspection exercise. To do that, we need a legal framework, which we are working on. We have shared the draft with Parliament, but it identified areas of modification. And in our country, when you make any law, there must be adequate public participation. So the draft that we had was returned because in the view of Parliament, it never received adequate public participation. But we have standards when it comes to body construction, because when we look at passenger vehicles, we have had a number of crashes whereby the body of the bus is ripped off. That means that the strength, the material used in assembling that vehicle sometimes may not be as strong enough. So the regulation, the standards regarding body construction have been reviewed to ensure that vehicles which are constructed from May this year meet the new standards. But it's still a challenge because vehicles which were constructed earlier than May this year were never subjected to those standards. So it is a matter of concern that we develop and be able to have passenger vehicles meeting the standards. With regard to construction, for example, the presentation you gave, I think we rely on the inspection done by those companies that are partnering with us in pre-shipment motor vehicle inspection, so that some of them I think are represented here, or one of them is represented in this particular room. We are also looking at the issue of emissions. And when we tried to test emissions on some of these motor vehicles, it was realized that the standards that we were using to test, which are actually the European Union standards, led to a sample study which was indicating that 80% of the vehicles on Kenyan roads will be declared unsuitable if we were to use those standards. So we are thinking, how do we implement this? Do we start to modify and progressively adjust towards the European standards? So it is something we are considering, but we already have the standards, yes, but not fully implemented because of the number of units that will be taken out of the road if we implement that standard fully. We are also looking at the issue of our environment, and we are concerned about emissions because in our country, for example, the level of emission in the city of Nairobi is high, and the Ministry of Health is already reporting increased cases of upper respiratory diseases associated with inhaling poor quality air attributed to emissions from vehicles. So the issue of e-mobility is a priority, particularly in the city. We are happy that there is a company from Finland that is coming to bring up some taxis to operate in Nairobi that are purely electric. And more than 200 units are arriving in January this year. We also have quite a number, but we are looking into the way of addressing the challenges which are there, which minimize uptake of such vehicles so that we can address the issue of emissions. So basically at the moment, I'll stop at that and maybe ready to answer any questions or clarification. But also when we look at, just one more minute, when we look at the rate of accidents in our country, we find that 30% of all accidents are caused by private cars. All deaths on our roads, 30% are by private cars, followed closely by commercial vehicles, which account for 26%, and then passenger vehicles contribute about 24%. A motorcycle, which is a growing mode of transport in Africa, at the moment it's 18%, but the rate at which it's increasing is of concern. So it means that we need to address the issue of motorbikes in the country. Thank you.
Wonderful. I think that was a very comprehensive cover of all the different issues from different parts of the continent, so in west, east, and north. It's fantastic. I'm going to try and stop at 6:30 if that's all right, because I think we started late, unless anybody wants to object. I just have one comment and then I'll invite the floor, which is I think it's very interesting the issue that came up around the date for import of mainly second-hand vehicles. And this is an optimistic point, which is that quite a lot of the vehicles coming now from Japan and from Europe, within, say, by 2020, the majority of them will already have electronic stability control, for instance, because that became mandatory in Europe and Japan around 2012. So there is actually, in the pipeline, a lot of safer vehicles heading your way for the second-hand imports. And it is a bit of a myth. I mean, this vehicle is brand new, but there are plenty of second-hand versions that'd be a better buy than that one. So that's a good part of the story. Although the one thing that does worry me a lot is because of the whole problems with Dieselgate, we are getting a collapse in prices of second-hand diesels. So to slightly counter my optimism, I think the markets of the world that are receiving second-hand vehicles will also have this problem of a large number of rather less expensive diesels, which will create an environmental challenge. So, but there are so many issues that have been raised. I'm sure there are a lot of questions, so I'll keep quiet. I think so. You wanted to ask a question. Huh? You have a question? No? No? Anyone else? Yeah, sure.
In your presentation, you illustrated the impact of having zero-star vehicles on our roads. Okay, and it appears most of these are found in Africa. Okay, and I think particularly you drew attention to the pickup of that particular brand. And what I'm asking is, so what's been done? What's been done? Is there any rule that the United Nations, for instance, based on its own protocol and standards, what is it doing? What is it doing to ensure that those vehicles don't come out? Because for us in Nigeria, for instance, we have the Automotive Council that inspects on a regular basis and complies with the standards because it has complied with the convention of the UN. Okay, so what is UN itself doing? And an institution such as yours, organizations such as yours, to check this?
Well, I think it's an opportunity for governments to make greater use of the United Nations regulatory system, which is it's hosted by the UNECE, UN Economic Commission for Europe in Geneva, and there are a series of different regulatory frameworks. One is for vehicle inspection, the 97 agreement. There's also two agreements, 1958 and 1998, for vehicle standards. These are for new vehicles, not necessarily for imported vehicles. And I think what should be happening now, this is very much part of the agenda for the UN Decade of Action, is to encourage countries like Nigeria, for instance, Tunisia and Kenya, to apply some, if not all, some of those standards. And it's relatively easy to do because you can use the certification processes that already exist and adopt these regulations. For example, for frontal impact, side impact and so on. If you do just the frontal impact requirement, it's very difficult to envisage a vehicle that doesn't also meet the seatbelt anchorage requirements. So you don't have to adopt the whole suite of regulations in order to start to have an impact. One thing that I think would make a good idea, both for new and second-hand vehicles, is to apply an age limit such as you do, and have it gradually moving forward. So you could go from 8 to 7 to 6 years progressively tightening it, but also have some qualitative standards as well, not just a time limit. So if you said, and you have, as I understand it, you have the capacity to do some pre-shipment inspections, you could require information to certify that the vehicle meets UN Regulation 94/95, which is front and side impact. That would help. Of course, the existing vehicle fleet is a lot of older vehicles, and they're way behind all of this. Some people say, why bother with what I'm talking about, because the big issue is the existing fleet, not new vehicles. And I would say the challenge to policymakers, it is a difficult one, it's like trying to do everything at once. But actually, if you don't keep an eye on the vehicles you're importing and the new vehicles, you're sowing seeds of future problems. And actually, it's relatively straightforward to adhere to UN regulations. The system exists, it can be applied pretty easily. It'd be particularly good if there were regional initiatives in Africa. If you had, say, for instance, ECOWAS or SADC or East African Community, could apply these more universally. You would save a lot of capacity problems. You could, could send a delegation, instead of having lots of governments show up in Geneva all the time, which is expensive and timely, you could do it through regional bodies. So I think there's a lot of opportunity for Africa to engage constructively in all of these things. And there are, of course, rules also for inspection. But nobody involved in this underestimates the challenges of how to apply it. Sorry, I'm hogging the floor. Yes, now you want to.
You still insist that I should ask my question. Mine is just an observation.
Where you're from?
Okay, I am from Nigeria, and I'm here purposely to support our Director of Transportation, Mrs. Antonia, in her presentation. That's why we're in this hall. And I'm proud to associate myself with her, because I'm glad it's her own presentation. It was an excellent one. My observation is that this is the first African road safety forum, and the emphasis of the forum is more of the policy formulators and the implementers of the policies than the target audience. This type of forum, because we are talking of the road safety, and from all the discussions from the beginning of this session, it was understood and agreed that the major causes of accident is not from the government side. It is either from the driver or from the vehicle. And neither the driver or the owners of the vehicle were invited to be part of the discussions here, so that you hear from them. Why are they having vehicles that are causing accidents? Why are drivers' organizations or unions are having accidents? What are the drivers' union doing to ensure there is safety on our road? What are the truck owners, the vehicle owners, the fleet owners, what are they doing? Their own association. What are they doing to ensure that there is safety on our road? So I think it's a suggestion on the second African Road Safety Forum. Those two targets in audience are very key and important in the discussions. They shouldn't be left at the audience to attend the forum. Secondly, from all I had also, generally the issue of safety in Africa, I think, is characterized under one topic. And this topic is one disease. A disease with branches. It's a cancer. It's HIV disease. Yes, it is HIV, it is cancer, it is even Ebola. And this singular disease is corruption. This is a disease in Africa. So I want to know what United Nations is doing to fight corruption in Africa. It is corruption that is killing everything in Africa. Without corruption, the African economy is enough for us to buy brand new vehicles to fly our roads. Without corruption, the African economy is also enough for us to have a good road in all the African nations. Without corruption also, the majority of Africans will respect traffic rules and regulations. It is when there is corruption. A leader, I'm sorry to say, a leader is corrupt. How can he expect somebody he is ruling or he is leading to have respected him? He will not respect him. That's why enforcement is very difficult in Africa. You cannot enforce it by force, because human being is very difficult to manage. It is the most difficult thing to manage in life. Anything that has to do with human is very difficult. So what United Nations must stand up to do something very serious and important to fight corruption. Let me give you an example. I was reading one document 2 years ago. I heard America is advertising that anybody that can buy a house worth $1 million, he will have automatic American citizenship. If you can afford to buy a house of worth $1 million in America, it's an automatic American citizenship. I read it somewhere. I cannot quote it exactly. So this is, and at the same time, America is champion. Is the world champion to fight corruption in Africa. And they are now giving this direct offer to our people in the Africa that will steal money, go and buy the house so as to end the American citizenship. So if you compare vis-a-vis fighting corruption, so United Nations has to wake up to help Africa to fight this disease so that we will have a road safety, free road in African continent. Thank you very much.
Very passionate intervention there. Would any of our panelists like to respond to those issues? Yeah.
Question, une question. Moi j'ai une question technique. Ça s'adresse aux représentants de SGS. Je reviens sur le contrôle du surpoids qui impacte bien sûr la qualité des chaussées et là impacte négativement la sécurité routière. Est-ce que vous pouvez nous expliquer un peu plus le cadre normatif, réglementaire et normatif de cette opération-là et comment vous le faites? Est-ce que c'est régulièrement? Je sais qu'il y a une recommandation de l'OIMM qui impose de mesurer lorsque le véhicule roule à 5 km/h à l'approche des péages, etc. Est-ce que c'est... J'aimerais bien avoir du détail sur ça.
Je vais répondre en français. La question m'est adressée en français. Nous avons ici à notre panel des représentants du Kenya qui pourraient aussi répondre sur cette question-là. Le Kenya a été très innovateur dans ce domaine-là. Il se trouve que, comme beaucoup de pays d'Afrique, le Kenya bénéficie d'un port à Mombasa qui dessert les pays enclavés, que sont notamment l'Ouganda. Donc, la route entre Mombasa et Nairobi, et puis entre Nairobi et la frontière rwandaise, est énormément usitée par les transporteurs. Pour un transporteur, s'il transporte un conteneur de 20 pieds, il charge certains revenus pour cette activité-là. Mais s'il double la charge, il double ses revenus. Son camion, il arrive à renforcer le châssis pour qu'un camion qui, supposé, doit transporter 40 tonnes, peut transporter jusqu'à 75 tonnes. Et il arrive à circuler. Mais pesant 75 tonnes, il va déformer la chaussée, et pesant 75 tonnes, sa distance de freinage va être quintuplée. Donc, les risques de sécurité routière sont complètement explosés dans ce domaine-là. Les administrations au Kenya ont décidé de prendre le problème bras le corps et ont émis un décret qui vient modifier la réglementation et qui rappelle ce qu'on appelle le PTAC, le poids total en charge, pour chaque catégorie de camions. Il a ensuite émis un appel d'offres dans le cadre duquel nous avons été mandatés pour implémenter un certain nombre d'outils qui commencent par ce qu'on appelle des ponts basculants en mouvement que nous positionnons sur la chaussée donc de ce corridor routier, la chaussée droite, et la police force les camions à passer sur la chaussée droite à certains endroits pour passer à la pesée en mouvement. Le camion passe à moins de 30 km/h. S'il a une pesée supérieure de 10% au PTAC autorisé, il est automatiquement dirigé vers un pont bascule statique qui est quelques kilomètres plus loin, où on va faire une contre-pesée. Si la contre-pesée confirme la surcharge, le camion est parqué, il est déchargé, la police intervient et émet une pénalité, et le camion reste à quai jusqu'à ce qu'un deuxième camion vienne pour charger la partie en surcharge du premier camion. Si le camion, par extraordinaire, venait à ne pas comprendre qu'il doit aller vers un contre-inspection parce qu'il a passé la première et qu'il sait très bien qu'il est beaucoup trop lourd, alors on a un système de caméra CCTV avec un système de rayons infrarouges qui compte le nombre d'essieux pour discriminer les différents types de camions et qui nous permettent de automatiquement traquer le camion et de le récupérer quelques kilomètres plus loin. Si le camion veut éviter le premier pont basculant en mouvement à la sortie de Mombasa et rentrer sur l'autoroute un peu plus loin, on a installé un deuxième pont basculant en mouvement. Il y en a 18 stations comme cela qui ont été déployées. Tout cela a été fait par quelqu'un que j'aimerais quand même nommer, puisque c'est l'initiateur de cette mesure, c'est l'ingénieur Muita au Kenya, qui a fait un travail extraordinaire dans ce domaine et qui mérite d'être salué et que j'espère sera répliqué dans d'autres pays d'Afrique. C'est un contrôle tout à fait légal, donc nous fournissons le service de contrôle de pesée Mais après, la sanction est donnée par les autorités, donc par la police. Le service est en place 24 heures sur 24, 7 jours sur 7. Donc nous avons des équipes sur toutes nos stations qui se relayent. Et nous avons surtout un gros système informatique qui recoupe toutes les informations pour compter tous les camions, tous les véhicules qui passent sur le corridor, pour s'assurer que toutes les informations sont réconciliées et qu'il n'y a pas de camion qui évite le contrôle. Alors au Maroc, on l'a proposé, ça a été étudié, on a invité les autorités à venir visiter ce qu'a fait le Kenya, encore en attente de réponse.
Yeah, well, my brother, I call him that. These are my fan club, you see. And you're welcome, brothers and sisters from Nigeria. Okay, the issue of corruption it's everywhere, and it's everywhere, and the interface between the African countries and the international, multinational promoters of corruption, as he's already highlighted, is there. But what we're proud about is that Nigeria is doing something about it. For our government, the present administration, and indeed for all of our government, we have institutional structures that are now curbing and working very hard to ensure that corruption is minimized. And it used to be a factor, especially for even vehicle inspection. But now with automation and computerization of testing and the involvement of private sector people like himself with such passion and international development partners collaborating, we are ensuring that all the anomalies that were associated and infractions that were associated with vehicle testing and licensing, most especially, curbed. And our president, the current one, is taking it very seriously, and we are all coming along with him. And so it's something that is being handled. But along with that, I think there is a very important point I need to emphasize, is the fact that there is a project which they are buying into, and we're just discussing now, whereby the government is encouraging, it's called a presidential initiative, whereby the government is encouraging a company that is partnering with international vehicle producers to come into Nigeria and swap the old vehicles for brand new ones and make the payments over time with some government support. I think that is one of the very important initiatives that the federal government has adopted. But more critically on the issue of tonnage of vehicles, or what vehicles carry, the issue of axle load and weight bridging. And for us in Nigeria, there is a law. Our National Assembly, that is our legislature, has just passed the law, and it has been gazetted by the federal government. Now, we do have specifications for vehicles. You can't carry more than you ought to. And we have also opened across the country dry ports, what we call dry ports, where if your goods are too many for you to carry, you can drop them in some locations and ride along and come back and pick them. So the axle load policy, that is what we call it. It was developed, my brother from Kenya talks about stakeholder participation. For us, it was developed with him particularly participating. He's in that axle load policy, and other stakeholders, all of them are here representing different institutions of government and the private sector sitting together and developing this, and a lot of enlightenment. So government is taking it very seriously, because not only that it ruins the vehicle, it also destroys the road. So, and for the West African axis, now ECOWAS has built a joint border post between Nigeria and Benin, and we also have one between Mali and Ghana, and we're having one between Nigeria and Cameroon. These joint border posts will have facilities, or do have facilities, for scanners and all of that, for checking the axle load content of the vehicles that ply the ECOWAS sub-region. And it's a policy that is welcome, and the president of these countries are going into bilateral relations, and we are enforcing at our level in the Nigerian government all of this, working with the Federal Road Safety Corps and the vehicle inspection officers, and now the private sector carrying out structured inspection and enforcement. As everyone here has said, is a norm. Without enforcement, you cannot carry on anything with safety. But I think beyond all of that, there is need for us to encourage international support, especially in enlightenment. You know, our countries are doing what they would and they ought to, but that element of enlightenment is something, it doesn't cost too much, but I think it is critical. And he's made a very important point, that the persons who need to be here are actually the drivers. And he has forgotten that we host in Nigeria every year an annual conference of all stakeholders. And one is coming up next month, and he will chair one of the panel, just as most of them that are here would. And that session, we call it the National Conference on Road Transport and Mass Transit Operations in Nigeria. It brings everybody, including the drivers. Everybody has a session, and we discuss the issues. And happily for us, because of the crave for safety, for this year, we're looking at safety as an import for development and for vehicle management. And we're going to talk about those, and I can assure you, my brother, that the drivers and mechanics and those who need to be, we can't fly them into Morocco, but we will bring them from wherever they are to sit on that panel in Nigeria. Thank you very much.
Great. Well, I think we'll bring it to it. Perhaps I'll just give a story. You know, the story of corruption is such an important one that you raised, but I'll come to you in a sec. But there are other parts. This is not unique to Africa by any means. There's an interesting example in police corruption in Georgia, the former Soviet Republic of Georgia. When there was a change of government there, it was very interesting. The public face of corruption was the police. They were constantly stopping people for no reason and all this sort of thing. So when it was actually Mr. Shakashvili who got in, he's no longer there, they did a very dramatic thing. It's a small country, but they fired the entire corps of road traffic police. They were all made redundant. They had to reapply for jobs. And then they got support from the Dutch government and various others. And they did a whole package of reforms, which actually worked out very well. And they were very interesting how comprehensive it was. Part of it was to tackle how much they were paid, because after all, corruption is just a hidden form of pay in a way. But also to change the kind of esprit de corps of the police. They improved equipment, they got better vehicles, they got the names of the police and numbers in big letters on their uniforms. They used much greater automated systems, which made it harder to actually make a corrupt transaction. And the net result of all this was a huge improvement in public confidence in the police, which made it easier to enforce. And somehow we have to get into this positive, virtuous circle. And in fact, revenues came in because they were enforcing more effectively. So, you know, these things can be done. There's another example also from that part of the world. Moldova had a big problem with, actually it's the equivalent of Matatu. They're called maxi taxis. They're very badly run, extremely dangerous. And there was a paradox. The European Bank for Reconstruction and Development had invested a lot of money in trolley buses in the center of Chisinau, the capital. And millions went into this project, which was sustainable transport, environment, and everything else. Within a year of the project starting, 1/3 of the trolley buses were out of action because they'd been crashed into by maxi taxis being driven badly. And they then had to have a complete reform package again to engage, exactly as you say, engage with the owners of these fleets to get them to understand that all this was crazy and that it wasn't helping anybody. And what they did is they created an incentive scheme to raise the quality of the maxi taxis, really creating a business opportunity for owners to have better vehicles, better training, and it was a kind of quality standard. And they started to lift, make good economic incentives for better run taxi firms who got favoured client status because they were doing that. And again, it's how do you engage and create demand for safety? And I think there are a lot of lessons from all around the world that I think could be applied here. Anyway, sorry, let you have. Would you like to give the gentleman a... Oh, he's got it already.
Merci beaucoup. Très très brièvement, puisque ça fait quand même assez tard, je voudrais tout juste rappeler qu'on est dans un système. Ce système, nous le savons tous, est constitué principalement par le véhicule, le facteur humain et l'infrastructure. Et j'ai l'impression qu'on a tendance à oublier qu'on est dans ce système. On est en train de parler de l'être humain, du conducteur, du passager. On est en train de parler de la corruption. On est en train de parler du véhicule. Et j'ai comme une impression de dissocier ce système de ses composantes. Alors que je pense que c'est la faute qu'il ne faudrait pas faire et procéder par ce qu'on appelle une approche holistique systémique. On n'a pas parlé aussi, jusqu'à aujourd'hui, de l'approche pour un système sûr, qui est basé sur une vision des objectifs, entre autres, bien sûr, et sur une chose très très importante, une nouvelle chose, c'est que ce facteur humain qu'on est parfois en train de diaboliser, il faudrait quand même le comprendre un peu plus, s'approcher de ce facteur humain et accepter son erreur, la comprendre afin que les activités et les interventions soient beaucoup plus efficaces. Et je terminerai par autre chose qui est très importante, c'est d'accepter, de comprendre les limites physiologiques de du facteur humain, afin que l'énergie qui est dégagée par l'impact ne soit pas supérieure énormément aux limites de l'intérieur. Juste, je voulais avancer cette remarque, parce que je pense, et je le répète et je conclue, si on ne traite pas le problème de l'insécurité routière dans un cadre, dans une approche systémique, on ne pourra pas avancer. On pourrait gagner, avancer sur des choses ponctuelles, mais on ne peut pas faire des gains très importants. Merci.
Yeah, a last word to our colleague from Kenya.
Yeah, I just want to state a sentence or two. Based on what I've heard from yesterday to today, what is very clear about the continent of Africa is that they are at various stages of making relevant or necessary policies to improve safety. They are also at various stages, or some have laws and policies already in place. But there is one weakness: effective implementation of the same, or effective enforcement of the same. With the effective enforcement of the same, then I think the continent will improve in the way of doing business and its safety. Thank you.
That's I think the last two interventions brought perfectly together the conceptual framework and the challenge of implementation. So could I ask everyone to put their hands together?